Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a plunge into something really foundational. We're looking at those long-held assumptions, the stereotypes about autism, especially around emotion recognition and empathy. Yeah, and our mission here is really to cut through some of that noise. We want to unpack recent research that's causing what some call a quiet upheaval. It's kind of a shortcut, maybe, to understanding what many autistic people have known about themselves for a long time. Our sources today, mostly a deep dive into some key studies, particularly from a research team led by Brewer and colleagues.
Exactly. And what's so compelling about this research, I think, is how methodically it's chipping away at those old myths. It's not just, broad declarations. It uses rigorous, methodical evidence to show the nuance, the variability that's often just missing. It's solid empirical work that really pushes back against the usual dismissals.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with that 2022 Brewer study. What feels so revolutionary about it, to me anyway, wasn't just asking if people got facial expressions right. It went that extra step, asking, did they know when they were right or wrong? That metacognitive layer, right?
Precisely. Of that awareness of your own perception. And the scale, first off, was impressive. Over 21,000 individual trials. That's a lot of data. And the core finding, well, it really was quietly revolutionary. Autistic adults performed just as well as non-autistic adults.
Just as well in tracking their accuracy, you mean?
Yes, exactly. In tracking the accuracy of their own responses. They used robust measures, gamma correlations, confidence accuracy calibration curves. Basically, solid statistical ways to check if someone's confidence actually matched their performance. It directly challenged that deeply ingrained stereotype.
And what about the response time? That was interesting too, wasn't it? They were generally slower.
They were, yes. Autistic participants tended to respond more slowly. But the study suggests something really important here. It wasn't like confusion or just cognitive delay. It looked much more like deliberation.
So being careful, not lost.
Exactly. Taking the time to be accurate, not just guessing quickly.
Okay, and then there was the overconfidence finding, which was maybe the most surprising part.
It was definitely fascinating. The group that was actually more likely to be overconfident, especially when they felt very certain, it was the non-autistic group.
Really?
Yes. The autistic participants, even though they generally rated their confidence a bit lower overall, showed calibration patterns, how their confidence matched reality, that lined up more closely with their actual accuracy. It suggests autistic people might actually be, in some ways, more precise in their self-monitoring than we assume neurotypical people are.
Wow. Okay, so if we take these findings seriously, this really flips a lot of the clinical narrative on its head, doesn't it? Instead of confirming mind blindness, it paints a picture of autistic cognition as, well, measured, self-aware, appropriately cautious.
That's a great way to put it. Measured, discerning, maybe, not impaired, deliberate, not delayed, definitely not deficient.
Yeah.
And it really makes you ask, how often do our assumptions about what's typical just blind us to different ways of being competent? Not just in emotion recognition, but across the board.
Right. So, okay, building on that, the same team, the Brewer team, did a follow-up in 2023, taking it into empathic appropriateness.
They did. They moved from static faces to more dynamic situations. Participants watched video clips of interactions. They had to name the emotions, suggest what an appropriate response might be, and then rate their confidence in their own suggestions.
How did that turn out? You said messy, eh?
Well, yeah, because judging social appropriateness is inherently messier, isn't it? The results showed autistic participants offered slightly fewer responses that matched the normative expectations set by judges. But, and this is important, the effect was pretty weak. And there was huge variability within both groups. Autistic and non-autistic people varied a lot in their responses.
So not some massive gulf between the groups.
But not at all. Social responses aren't monolithic, even for neurotypicals.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, right? The confidence thing again.
Exactly. This was the most striking finding, I think. Autistic participants were significantly less confident in their suggestions, even when their answers were judged as perfectly appropriate or correct.
Even when they got it right, they were less sure.
Yes. And crucially, neither group was actually very good at knowing if their own suggestions were appropriate. Confidence didn't really predict accuracy well for anyone on that complex task.
Huh. So confidence and actual social appropriateness weren't strongly linked for anybody.
Pretty much. Which, if you connect it back, really reframes the whole thing. It points towards a difference in perceived social fluency or maybe social anxiety rather than a fundamental lack of empathy.
Meaning autistic adults might just be second-guessing themselves more because they've maybe been told they're getting it wrong so often.
That seems very plausible. The old stereotype of the unfeeling autistic person just, it doesn't hold up. It's not about not caring. It might be about navigating expectations tied to neurotypical scripts.
So for you listening, what this really underscores is that autistic people do engage, they do try to figure out others' needs, they do respond with care. The difference seems to be less about the empathy itself and more about the confidence to trust their own instincts, especially when those instincts have been maybe pathologized.
Yeah, you have to wonder about the impact of constantly being told you're socially off, how much self-censorship that might lead to.
And there's other work supporting this shift too, right? Not just Brewer's team. You mentioned Keating, Ichio, and Cook from 2023.
Yes, their study looked at internal emotion representations, and their finding was quite unexpected too. They found that autistic adults actually had more precise internal visual representations of emotions. Their mental templates for anger or joy were, in a sense, more sharply defined than non-autistic adults.
More precise mental pictures of emotions. But wait, here's the twist. That precision didn't lead to better scores on emotion recognition tests for them.
Exactly. That's the crucial disconnect. For neurotypical participants, having a sharper mental template generally correlated with better recognition scores. Makes sense, right? But for autistic participants, that link wasn't there. More precision internally didn't mean better recognition externally, according to the tests used.
So what does that imply? It's not that they can't perceive it clearly.
Right. It's not a basic perceptual deficit. Maybe it's more about, let's call it interpretive friction. They process the expression clearly, internally. But what they do with that information, how they interpret it or respond in a testing situation, might follow different pathways. It echoes Brewer's findings. Again, maybe holding back, maybe second-guessing, maybe processing it differently due to past experiences of being told they're socially broken.
So the frame shifts again, from deficit to difference. Not in capacity, but maybe in the interface with a world expecting a certain kind of response.
Precisely. It's about the interaction, not just the internal ability.
Which I guess brings us to this bigger, more critical point about, well, the problem of incrementalism in autism research. It just feels staggeringly slow, doesn't it, for the field to actually accept what autistic people themselves have been saying for ages, even with studies like these piling up.
It is slow, and there are structural reasons for that, unfortunately. Institutional biases often still favor deficit-based models. They're easier to pathologize, frankly, easier to get funding for sometimes, and they align with existing clinical frameworks people are used to.
And neurotypical responses just remain the default standard.
Often, yes. They're the unspoken benchmark. So any divergence gets interpreted as dysfunction, not just difference. The bar for recognizing autistic competence can possibly high, like you have to perform identically to the norm to be seen as capable.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this? It feels like a kind of epistemic gatekeeping, maybe, where this solid evidence of autistic strengths, like in Brewer studies, just accumulates quietly in journals, while the older deficit narratives keep getting amplified in diagnostics and media everywhere. And that's not just academic, right? That has real costs, personal, political, lived costs for autistic people.
Absolutely. The inertia has profound consequences.
And even just looking at, like, the citations for these studies kind of shows that inertia, doesn't it? The 2022 Brewer paper, even though it's open access and pretty foundational, has gotten, well, modest citations so far.
Relatively modest, yes.
Yeah.
And the 2023 follow-up, which digs even deeper into the social appropriateness stuff, has seen even slower uptake. Part of that is likely because it's behind a paywall, which always limits reach, unfortunately. But it reflects this broader academic latency. There's often a real reluctance to let go of long-held narratives, especially deficit ones. Studies that confirm impairment often get cited quickly because they fit the existing story. Studies that challenge the foundation, they gather citations much more slowly. The system rewards novelty, sure, but it can be quite resistant to actual paradigm shifts.
So the science is moving, but the story being told about autistic people isn't really keeping pace. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. The core takeaways from this deep dive seem to be, well, first, autistic people can and do track their own accuracy in recognizing emotions. They're not necessarily confused by faces. They might just be more cautious, more deliberate.
Right. And what often gets labeled as a failure of empathy looks much more like it could be a reflection of internalized doubt. Doubt may be stemming from living in a world that constantly signals that their social instincts are somehow wrong.
Yeah.
So this research really pushes for a profound shift, doesn't it? Away from asking, what's wrong with autistic people? And towards asking, What is it about our systems, our assumptions, our tests that repeatedly misread or even pathologize autistic ways of being, and why?
Hmm.
It's really a call for researchers, clinicians, everyone to actually listen to autistic voices, to design studies that look at real-world interactions, not just lab tests, and to finally recognize that empathy is way more complex than just checking boxes on an accuracy test. Care emerges when people feel safe enough to show up authentically.
Right, not forced into a neurotypical box. So the research is here, the evidence is definitely accumulating. The final thought for you, our listener, is what do you think it will actually take? What will it take for the field, for the culture around autism to truly catch up to what autistic people have in many ways always known about themselves?